Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you, Secretary Perdue, for being here today and taking so much of your valuable time. Especially thank you for visiting my district after Hurricane Michael struck it. Shortly after it, you were there on the ground. I know you know the value of the losses due to that storm and that it rivals everything in 2017. You and I know that the key to standing a rural community back up after a hurricane or wildfire is to ensure agricultural economy recovers quickly. Unfortunately, Congress so far has failed to pass a disaster supplemental program for 18. Like many issues in Washington, it's hung up on other unrelated political things, not questions of policy. First question to you is, how can we help you to be better equipped in the future to respond to natural disasters like this? And I know that's a long, complicated question, so you may direct your staff to respond to that, work with us, as we go along down the pike. And let me say, your staff has been an absolute joy to work with after this.
Well, thank you. We appreciate it, and we're proud of our staff and the response that they give to your members' questions. We know that these are not things that you think up. They're constituent service issues, and we want to be responsive to them. I think, again, the Farm Bill does a great job in ordinary type of risks that are involved in farming from a safety net perspective. No one can contemplate major disasters as we've seen in 17 and 18, and therefore, I think, again, from Congress's ability to move very quickly from an appropriation restoration thing, we will be prepared to move very quickly. As I said, this year, having learned what we learned last year over the WHIP program, we're ahead of the game in order to be able to implement that and get those resources into the pockets of your constituents that need it desperately.
I look forward to working with your staff on developing more quick response methods. 87% of the ag losses in Florida due to Hurricane Michael were timber. $1.3 billion worth of trees on the ground. I've spoken to constituents who've lost their entire retirement savings, which were in the form of timber, with the destruction of this. What can we do to help these folks, and do you believe the block grant, like what we did with citrus last year, would be appropriate for timber?
It's a great question. We actually will have to design a program for timber. It's not been typically in a disaster program because it typically hadn't suffered like Hurricane Michael. The swath of timber loss between the panhandle of Florida all the way up 150 to 75 miles into inland was in Alabama and Georgia was like nothing I've ever seen. That's not a typical crop that we think of, but it is an agricultural crop. It just has a longer growing cycle, and I think we certainly, as you indicated, that was many of these couples' 401k that they were using to fund their retirement in that area. And it's we will develop, I think, appropriate. You mentioned the block grant. More than likely, there will be some of that in there.
Let me go on here. So I appreciate your help with that. We also have a crisis in the Apalachicola forest. So many trees are on the ground. They've been on the ground for 4 months. That makes them pretty much past the point of salvage. We had some categorical exclusions in the House Farm Bill language, which didn't make it in the final version, that would have allowed you to much more rapidly salvage and remove that debris. I want you to know that we'll work together with you to try to get that language across the finish line this session, again, because we could have salvaged a lot more trees than we did salvage. And finally, with the devastation of our timber crop, many of my sawmills will not have any wood that they need for decades after this. I'm going to ask you to work with our office where we can to ease the regulatory burdens and give sawmills access to the wood that they need to continue their timber operations. And that's just a yes.
One of the best ways we can do that is by making available timber sales in our national forest, and that's what we are in the process.
Music to my ears, Mr. Secretary. Again, let me tell you, staff's been great to work with, and I want to echo the words of Mr. Crawford. You are the right man in the right place at the right time. Thank you very much for all of your efforts. I yield back.